Good evening, this is Matthew Huddle.
And Tom Zazinski.
And you are listening to the Hero's Breath podcast. The date of this recording is Tuesday, October 16th. This is episode number 2. We are going through the hero's journey, the monomyth cycle, the 17-stage cycle that Joseph Campbell dissected and expounded upon in his work, The Hero with a Thousand Faces, and throughout his career. Today we are starting with Phase 1, Act 1. This is Ordinary World.
We did cover most of the stages that we're going to be going through over the course of this podcast in episode 1, so definitely go back and listen to that one if you're just joining us. Give you a little more context for what we're about to go into today.
A little housekeeping. We want to give a shout out to our sponsor, the Phi Center. That is phicenter.nyc. They are a holistic practice. We've got acupuncture, neurofeedback, a special neurofeedback system, proprietary system called the Mind Program. I've been seeing astounding results. I have ADHD, OCD, and dysthymia. I was diagnosed at age 20. I'm just swearing up and down the benefits of the Mind Program right now. You can, of course, go to the YouTube channel. If you're watching this on the highlights, you can go to the playlist Mind Program Journal, and you can see my experience with the Mind Program from the very beginning on. All right. Housekeeping done, moving on. The ordinary world for the audience is where the hero starts.
Right.
And right away it almost bleeds right into Call to Adventure and Refusal of the Call, stage 2 and 3. But we want to focus exactly on what that ordinary world looks for the person now. Instead of dissecting cinema and literature, let's talk about what the ordinary world is for us. For us, it's wake, eat, work, sleep, repeat.
Right, it's the known, it's the familiar, it's the comfortable.
That is where we live. And there was this really astounding movie put out in 2001 called Waking Life. It was made by Richard Linklater. It was like a cornucopia of astounding philosophical insights. He managed to get together some of the greatest philosophers of the 20th century into this movie. And there was this one scene with Professor Louis Mackey. His vignette has been widely regarded as probably the most impactful. There are two kinds of sufferers in this world: those who suffer from a lack of life, and those who suffer from an overabundance of life. I've always found myself in the second category. When you come to think of it, almost all human behavior and activity is not essentially any different from animal behavior. The most advanced technologies and craftsmanship bring us, at best, up to the super chimpanzee level. Actually, the gap between, say, Plato or Nietzsche and the average human is greater than the gap between that chimpanzee and the average human. The realm of the real spirit, the true artist, the saint, the philosopher, is rarely achieved. Why so few? Why is world history and evolution not stories of progress, but rather this endless and futile addition of zeros? No greater values have developed. Hell, the Greeks 3,000 years ago were just as advanced as we are. So what are these barriers that keep people from reaching anywhere near their real potential? The answer to that can be found in another question, and that's this: which is the most universal human characteristic? Fear or laziness?
Think about how this applies to you. Where do you find yourself right now in your ordinary world, and what's keeping you there? This is almost in tandem with, the call to adventure. What we're going to really try to dive into tonight is how this kind of manifests for us in our lives, how it has manifested for us in our lives, and where we were and where we find ourselves now.
It's like that speech by David Foster Wallace, This is Water. We can't leave links because the family keeps having the videos taken down. It's really pathetic.
There is a video on YouTube, actually.
Yeah, but you have to keep finding it because it keeps getting taken down. Yeah. This professor was given a commencement speech before he died. He started with this illustration. These two young fish were swimming through the lake, and this old fish comes swimming past them and says, "Hey, fellas, how's the water?" And he swims on. The one younger fish looks to the other and says, "What the fuck is water?" He went on to talk about the fact that we lead these lives. You graduate college, you go to your job, you realize you don't have food, you just work 9-10 hours, you're exhausted, you go to the supermarket, and every person is pissing you off. And when you stop and really live where you are, really accept where you are, not get so pissed off with everything that you can't accept, but accept the moment as it is. Each person has their story, and maybe you're not so friggin' important, and you should just live and breathe with everyone else. We don't realize we're swimming in these moments. So when you're living in your ordinary world, you don't really think about it. The hobbits. Okay, so here comes some cinema and literature. Frodo didn't think he was about to go on some grand adventure. He didn't expect any of this stuff. He was just going through his life, celebrating his uncle's birthday, and he didn't realize the adventure was about to start that night. So we never think about those things. We never think about the adventure we're living. We're just fish swimming in many ways.
Sometimes you really do need to just take a moment to stop and maybe assess and maybe realize that what you're thinking isn't what the reality in fact is.
I'm hearing some Eckhart Tolle in there.
Eckhart and every other fucking great philosopher out there, This is where we find ourselves, in the ordinary world. It's what we know, it's what we're familiar with, but there's this whole other realm of possibility that we're just not open to because we are not present.
What Professor Mackey was talking about is that we're revealing something, or we should be revealing something, like Nietzsche and Plato and Aristotle and all these great philosophers revealed something, did something, really touched and reached something, went somewhere, took us to another level as a species, but most of us aren't. And I often think about how Dr. Peterson talks about the Pareto distribution principle. All the talent goes up to the top. Even among professional basketball players, there's only a handful that are a household name. Composers, bankers. We talk about the 1% in terms of economics, but we don't realize that has to go to everything. So the talent, the ability to cross these realms, to go on these fantastic journeys of the soul, to come back with the kind of philosophy that we talk about for hundreds or thousands of years. Why so few, he says. Is it fear or laziness? It's such a complicated question, because I think it really, in the end, spoiler alert, I think it kind of wraps into each other. It's almost like a non-starter, because you can increase your skill. I'm awful with any sport whatsoever. I'm a great martial artist, but give me a ball or a puck or a stick and all of a sudden I'm a complete and total spaz. Now, is there a certain level of skill? If I had the desire to learn to play basketball, could I probably be really good at it? Yeah, I'm very strong, I'm very athletic, I'm very dexterous and well coordinated. I probably could if I had that desire. But I'm never going to be, I don't know, LeBron James, is he still a thing? I'm never going to be, clearly, I'm never going to be one of these guys. So at what point do we ask humanity to go so far for the average person when maybe they don't have that natural talent, maybe they don't have that desire to really pull through their soul, go through the hero's journey in such depth? Now, the whole premise of my company, the whole premise of this podcast is that everyone can go through the hero's journey to some degree, but what expectations do you set for yourself? Now, is that fear? Is that laziness, saying that maybe we shouldn't set those high expectations? We have to start asking these questions and breaking them down. Holy shit, when you think about the implications of where do I start?
Where are you right now?
Where I was 5, 6, 7 years ago was an atrocious place. I think you have to stare at the void before you even leave. You have to know that there's a void, there's a dragon, you may not know exactly what to expect, but you have to know to expect some heavy shit.
Or at the very least, to know that there's more. But you have to accept the fact that there are things that you don't know. So going back to the ordinary world, it's like, here's what's comfortable. Here's what I've always known. I wake up, I eat breakfast, I go to work. This is my 9 to 5. Every single moment is ordinary. Every single moment is a call to adventure. There is always more, right? But where are you right now? Because there's constantly fear beckoning at the door. Fear, laziness. These two go hand in hand. And
they're hard to unravel. Here we are talking abstraction. I'm going to talk about my past a little bit. I began my journey towards a wider, more dangerous world in, I would say, my 20s. And I was raised in a semi-obscure Christian sect. Dr. Jordan Peterson said something that has always stuck with me, and I even put it on my website. Ideologues assume the problems of the world are someone else's fault, or they assume that broad-scale systemic change, according to their dictates, is a prerequisite to utopia. A truly religious person tries to change him or herself, which is a much more difficult and less grand task. When I was in my teens and 20s, I was an ideologue. I was an obnoxious ideologue. I had so many assumptions about other people based upon the hearsay of everyone in my own echo chamber. While the religion itself was apolitical, somewhat removed from the rest of the world, kind of locked off in my own world. I don't want to say a cult, but, had a lot of that flavoring. I wasn't up on a compound. I was kind of, each member of the church and the religion was locked in a compound in their own mind. So even though they could go to work like everyone else, there's always this wall between them and everyone else. Despite the fact that there was empirical evidence that that the world is getting better, life expectancy, food certainty, literacy, all these things are going up around the world. The world was a terrible, dark, and continually malevolent place. It was all because of Satan, and God had to fix everything, and there was no hope. Nothing humans could do. We just had to rely on the imminent and violent return of Christ. If I wanted to see that glorious day and live in God's paradise for eternity, I had to make sure that I stayed in lockstep with everyone else. There was a lot of judgment of everyone outside, and I'm still unboxing a lot of this stuff and taking a lot of it out because there are latent programmings in my unconscious. Shortly after leaving that, and maybe a little bit beforehand, I slipped into neo-Marxist thinking. Never read a manifesto or anything else, but looking back on my thought and the way I talked, I was basically a commie. Hatred for America, punk music and all this, and metal and anything like just anti-system. And you would think that like atheistic socialism and communism and like this fringe super Jesus-y Christian stuff wouldn't jive. But like I said, there was a point where like the two, like as I slipped out of the religion and more into this communist thought, there was definitely a blending point, and it was because there's foundational structures that are mutual. They have a mutual hatred of materialism. The commies say that the rich are the oppressors. The church folks say that, you know, they're easier it is for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. You know, like, this is all still in my head.
You were part of that Christian sect.
Yeah.
But that was something that you were born into, right? Versus the neo-Marxism.
There's already the foundation for me to accept that kind of thought. You know, you rejected the world's thinking and the world's ways and the world's this and the world's that. Just like a lot of socialists and Marxists. I mean, the irony is that they tweet about how much America sucks from their brand new iPhone while they're sitting in Starbucks drinking a $9 latte. So to have a mutual hatred of something, that's where a lot of these groups these days, like we kind of alluded to last time, is they intersect. Intersectionality is a real thing because they have mutual hatred. And you look at where all their hatred intersects. And so the enemy of my enemy is my friend. That's where my ordinary world and all its negative viewpoints, and this is, again, this leads into why I started this company, is because by breaking out of the set of one and then the other and getting a more clear, higher perspective, really realizing where the latent tendencies for judgment and presupposition and assumption about other people's motives, all these things come into play. And they're the exact same modes of thinking and ways of operation that weird right-wing Christian groups and far-left commies, they operate the exact same way.
I think this is going to something that we're going to keep coming back to, but the fact that like we as humans are tribal.
Yes. Right? Yes.
We are highly dogmatic,
very much,
even if we choose not to be. This potential for hatred and the fact that we gravitate to that, we prefer, we seek.
It's the default setting.
Unity, you know, like the
hate and unity. I like that.
You know, the tribalism offers us the opportunity for that. It binds us when we can stand in opposition to something or an idea or a group of people, whatever it is, we have hatred for.
The only reason Cortez got as far as he did is because he got all the other tribes to unite against the Aztecs. You know, because they were all tired of being shat upon by the people in power, so they united with somebody else who had power.
Very true.
A lot of these fringe groups do the exact same thing, and that's the frightening thing, is that
that's why
they can come together a little bit.
That's why it's
so
easy to find a commonality between them all, because you can go from some, you know, completely ultra-right, you know, extremist group to a completely ultra-left extremist group. And yet the commonality, that's it right there.
And I did it, and a lot of other people did it, where it's better to harshly judge someone else. I had a big problem with people of the LGBT community. All my thousands of little sins, it was easier to be more judgmental and harsh on somebody whose supposed sin was more obvious. So I would rail on the gays, and that would come out on the platform too. Like, kids learn not by what you say, but by how you are and what you do and how you feel. It's the words said in between the words. I'm not going to say that they told us to hate gays from the pulpit, but they told us to hate gays from the pulpit without saying hate gays.
Right.
You ask any of the adults who made the choice to join the religion, they don't see this stuff. They are blind to it. But kids pick up on this stuff. So if you were raised in it, it's completely different understanding than the people who made the choice. It was part of my parents' hero's journey to find this faith because it gave them so much that it's influenced their lives and filled their souls and their hearts. And I would never take it away from my parents. And that's why I'm kind of vague in talking about it now, is because I don't want that to become like a real barrier between me and my folks. It's hard enough as it is, them living with their pagan son, but but I don't want to be so vocally, against it, because it does serve a purpose for people. The problem is if I were to stay in it, even though it didn't serve me. It's the same, like if you talk to the elders of my congregation, they'll say I was lured away by Satan. If you talk to my old socialist comrades, they would say that I sold out. But that's just because they need that something to hang on to, and I didn't. So I left, and they need a justification for my abandonment, so they don't feel invalid. Mark Twain talked about that a lot. It's ridiculous how people put their validation on other people's beliefs and actions. In a glorious libertarian utopia, nobody bothers each other, but that doesn't exist.
So what was holding you there up until the point you decided to branch out?
For a lot of it, it was fear that if I wasn't of this faith, then God would wipe me out and nobody would remember me throughout all eternity, and I would just disappear. I'd be an unperson, which is what the communists do when they tear down statues and have names removed off buildings. I can honestly say, for me, there was never much of a measure of laziness. I was always prone to think for myself. And if I became dogmatic, it was only because I was trying to defend something that I knew in my heart wasn't right. It was like Jordan Peterson says, if you're saying something that isn't true, how do you know? You'll feel it in your body, in your heart, in your gut, in your brain, in your eye, wherever you feel that not, is then stop talking. And when I stopped talking and I started listening, that's when I realized I can't do this anymore. I can't stay in this anymore. So for my family, I pulled the Band-Aid off slowly. A lot of people who leave the faith, they just up and run. Their family excommunicates them. I know a lot of people whose parents, uncles, grandparents, siblings were not at their wedding, have nothing to do with their grandkids. It's really horrible in a lot of very profound ways. The noise in your head and the feeling of discontent and anger and resentment burns in some people.
There's those who remain in that because even that anger and that resentment
feels comfortable,
is familiar.
Yes.
But the thing is, for others, that could be the call to action. That could be the thing that drives you
to go find those dragons.
To seek what is unknown. You've also found other quote-unquote tribes to belong to. There was a period in your life where you were not consuming animal flesh.
I was in the vegan tribe.
You were in a vegan tribe.
I bounced through tribes. I don't have a home.
But
I'm like a fucking vagrant. I'm a philosophical vagrant. Let's just call it what it is. There's the pin I can wear.
That's normal. I think that's innately human, though, to seek that out, because we want to find a community where we feel we belong, where we feel there's some unity around an idea. I feel like there's always hatred at the core of this, because we're always seeking to unify against something.
There needs to be an other.
There needs to be another, but my goal, honestly, is to get people to unify, not against, but for something.
That is a very powerful goal. That's a lifetime kind of thing.
That's a lifetime, but I want to relate some of my own experiences. I was brought up Catholic my entire life, a very safe, comfortable place to be. My entire family was, my community at church. I am in no way ever going to bash Catholicism. I see the value in it. It creates a structure, it creates a place. I will bash them for some of the ways they unfortunately
It's an easy bandwagon to get on.
Absolutely. For a lot of the ways that they misunderstood the real teachings of Christ, and Christhood and what Christ consciousness really truly is. I always sought solace in it. I was always able to seek comfort in some of the teachings. One of the most difficult things to do was to actually start to unravel some of that dogma and to start to very slowly step away from it while still maintaining what you pointed out earlier. It's there's those who just rip the Band-Aid off, and there's those who will do it slowly. I opted for the slower approach because I didn't want to strain those relationships. And even to this day, I have to watch how I choose to phrase certain things. I can talk using the symbols and the language that they're familiar with, but to expound on ideas that might not necessarily be there inherent in that structure. I can talk about Taoist thought. I can talk about Buddhist thought.
Because they have so many lines of interconnection.
Absolutely, and that's the beauty of it.
But they won't know that if you just told them that.
At the core, all of these faiths and traditions and philosophies really do talk about the same thing. Where did I get that from? Shit, when I went to college, college, as an undergrad, I chose to study world religion. I went in thinking, okay, I'm going to get myself a nice little degree here. I'm going to go get my liberal arts education, then go for a PhD, and eventually teach university. That was my goal. That was the trajectory. I was just exposed to so many ideas and so many different ways of thinking, that crossing of the threshold where I really had to acknowledge that, okay, here are all these things I had no idea existed, or I had no means for understanding at such a great depth. But when we start to discuss them and I'm seeing all of these different potentials, I was blown away. It really made me question at such a core level who I was, my own faith. Coming from a tradition that told you that all of these things are heretical and, God forbid you should start to dive into them and engage in them and start to believe in them. Holy shit.
Even though you feel your soul pulled towards it.
I was always drawn to Eastern philosophy.
Same
because there's so much there, it just made sense to me.
Yeah.
But I could also see the commonalities. When you start to actually study the history, where some of these rituals, practices, and thoughts, and some of the ideas of the church and the church itself, how that developed, how that spread. Even to this day, there's moments like internally, like because the programming was so strong, like I feel like this, like, holy shit, I hope I'm not, gonna get condemned to hell.
Right?
It goes back down to, we need an enemy, we needed another, we needed Satan to fight against, so we had to unify around that. It's fear that produces hatred. Just to quote my man Yoda.
Yes, please.
Fear is what he told Anakin. That's where it starts, because that leads to hatred, and hatred leads to anger and violence.
Anger leads to suffering, and suffering leads to the dark side. It's easy to talk about fear, especially in this context, especially in the context of the hero's journey, because we're talking about all the unknown. Jordan Peterson broke this down, that people who lean right tend to have a tendency for revulsion, to feel revulsion quicker. And evolutionarily speaking, it does serve a purpose to keep the outsiders who may be diseased outside. If the native had more of that ability in them, they would have pushed the Europeans back. They would have been more reviled, and they wouldn't have all died of smallpox. So it serves an evolutionary function. We don't think in the context where laziness could be an option.
There's some part inside of our lives where there is some laziness, where we are still stuck in that ordinary world, because this hero's journey, like, there's so many layers to it, and it's operating on so many different levels. But in the broader scheme, like,
right,
at our core,
that's a difference. It's a laziness where we let someone else establish the borders of our world for us. Thinking about what Dr. Peterson would talk about, where do these things serve their function, evolutionarily speaking? Our ancestors who couldn't have a clear visible sclera didn't make it, didn't reproduce, got killed, whatever, because the tribe members couldn't read their eyes.
Yeah.
And these are really subtle, we don't think about until somebody says them, you go, oh fuck.
And for those who don't know what you're talking about, let's just unpack that. Why would they want to look into our eyes, be able to read our eyes? What is that?
It tells us what we're thinking.
Tells us what we're feeling, right?
and what we're thinking, what we're feeling, what we're planning. It served an evolutionary function in terms of our development as a species, because it built trust. Communication, trust, affinity for each other, so we knew who was the same and who was the other. I also think of the book Tribe by Seth Godin, the marketing guru. Talked about how we form our tribes and how it used to be based on survival and proximity to each other, and then we built these walls, and we built these structures, and we built this order, and we built these flags, and we built these terms of identification. Now we do the opposite. We're all scattered about. We're all in our little cubicles. We're all in our shitty little apartments, but we find each other online. Now the interests draw us together. Whereas it used to be we developed interest out of the things we did to proximity to each other. There are some tribes that specialize in pottery, some tribes that specialize in basket weaving, some tribes that specialize in, stonemasonry. Imagine all those tribes were suddenly all spread out and they all lived among each other, but they went online looking up basket weaving, talking on basket weaving forums, even though they live among all stonemasons.
I always bring it back to the first commandment: you shall have no other idols before me. Just to dissect this a little bit, we naturally think in a dualistic brain. But the thing is, we create these structures and they serve a purpose, right? But the thing is, we forget that that's all there is, that it's an arbitrary structure to serve a purpose. We choose to make it an absolute. We treat it as a thing in and of itself. It is an ultimate reality. This is creating the idol, right?
Well, it's a human construct, but it's a human construct for a reason. We just don't question the water.
And we get lost in it. That's why we get so tribal about it. That's why we get so political about it. That's why we get so ingrained in it, and we refuse to question it or its purpose.
When I left the church finally, I actually had to sit down with some of the elders, the threshold guardians. I questioned some of the rituals, some of the foundational ritual. And I said, well, so why do we do this? And they said, well, Jesus told us to. I'm like, okay, but Jesus told us to so that we remember the spiritual concepts behind it. So if we did it every day, we wouldn't need this yearly ritual. I don't want to be demeaning or degrading, but it really felt like I was talking to a couple of puppies who didn't understand the concept. The very concept of questioning why we would need this ritual. Of course, now I'm a Freemason and ritual is very important. I understand it more. I'm a little older and a little wiser, and I can be a little more diplomatic about it. But like you say, if you don't question the ritual, and that's where I think laziness really is people not questioning. And those are the people who will spend their lives as NPCs.
The NPCs are?
Non-playable characters. Those are the characters that will never amount to anything. And I don't want to, again, sound so harsh on it, but there are plenty of people who never did anything with their talent, great musicians, great writers, actors, poets, painters, stonemasons, who never got up and went for it. And there are so many reasons, and some of them may be valid, some of them may not be. Go on YouTube right now, look up armless painter. People who are painting with their toes and their teeth and their neck and arm, and it's like, your excuse is exactly what again?
You brought up that quote, right? And the Platos and the Nietzsches, their life is nothing but a question. This is what it means, really, truly, is that, we need to question constantly. It's accepting that there is a lot that you don't know that you don't know.
That's where fear and laziness overlap. These mobs today, some people go out to confront the mobs, and they say, well, did you do this research on this subject that you're campaigning against, that you're rioting for? Well, I don't need to. You always hear that from the crowd of these thugs out there. They're, I don't need to, or I already know, So I had to, at some point, question my beliefs in centralized authority. And I did come from that. I came from a theocratic world, but then it's like, we'll let the government do everything. And it's like what Jordan Peterson said, we're always looking for some sort of freaking utopia. And my last channel in Monster Health and Fitness, the last vlog series that I did was called No Portal to Utopia. As an homage to Rick and Morty, really. The idea I find now is that utopia is only the place where the treasure is stored. Utopia is not the final destination, because there is none. The hero cycle is more important than any spot. It's like the person who works till they're 65 and barely functional and have had 2 bypasses, but they finally made retirement, and they go say, I'm going to live on a beach in Maui for the rest of my life. Like, that's your utopia. That's great. You're sitting on the beach, and there's naked women bouncing around all around you. That's fantastic. How long can you really put up with that crap? There's no fulfillment.
Absolutely. And that's another thing that you and I are very focused on, is creating fulfillment and helping
meaning,
others
purpose.
find that meaning and purpose in their lives. But it reminds me of that story that I've heard repeated so often. There's a rich guy. He buys an island, goes there, and there's a fisherman. He's got his own little boat. He approaches the fisherman, and he's like, why don't you continue to catch fish and maybe hire some hands. These hands can help you produce more, purchase more boats, get more fish.
It was the fisherman who was asking, why would I do that? And then why would I do that? And then why would I do that?
The fisherman continues to ask, why would I do that? Why would I do that? Well, at the end of the day, all the fisherman wants is to be able to come home, relax, feed his family, which is what he's already doing.
People say, okay, well, practically speaking, that's all well and good in philosophy. In theory, what do you do when you're too old to work? Well, if you spend enough time with your kids and you raise them right, they take care of you when you're old. We've been doing this for thousands of years. We've only interrupted this cycle for the last 100. How well has that really worked for us?
In whole large extended families. We've always lived as a tribe, never in these little small isolated single family homes. Like the elders always had a purpose. If they were no longer physically able to work, well, they still had their wisdom and knowledge to contribute. They were still passing on stories and lessons. They were still engaged in the community. They still had a purpose.
Like I said, the way kids are really raised more by the feel of the environment than what you actually say and do. And what you say, they go by what you do. When I was a commie, I was so quick to blame capitalism for this. Everyone goes out and works and works and works. I flip to the other side of the aisle and I go, well, everyone works and works and works because we're tax and tax and tax. It becomes cyclical. I started watching the show Peaky Blinders. It was when the Officer Campbell, this cop comes in from another district to clean up this town, and he says to all the cops on the gang's take, He says, you keep looking the other way while the corruption and the rot and whores and the drugs and everything gets into your streets. He said, then things get worse in the ghettos, they get worse in the factories. The factory owners don't want to pay workers who can barely function, who are drunk all the time, and then they get pissed off that they don't have enough wages. Then the communists move in. This was a big problem in the early 20th century in England. The communists move in and take advantage of the situation. You are all perpetuating the cycle. And he told the officers, you are where it stops. And this is where I think that the cultural divide here in this country starts to get bigger. Is one thing leads to another, to another, to another. And where it started is almost irrelevant at this point. It's where does it stop? And there's people on one side who are saying, it stops when we'll be civil when we get rid of all of our opposition. But the other side is saying, it stops with me.
Yes, that's exactly.
That's the difference.
No matter what tribe you belong to, political or otherwise, there will always be people who just want to stop the other, period. At the end of the day, honestly, part of what we're doing here with this podcast is for you to just look at where you are in your own life. We all know at a core level that there is so much more potential inside each and every single one of us, but there are so many things that are holding us back, whether they stem from fear or stem from laziness or a conflation of the two. There's always somewhere, some way where we're stagnant, we're not moving, or we're not growing. Where are we being called to action and not responding?
Wherever you are, whatever sect, whatever tribe you're in, you need to take that certain level of responsibility. And if you find yourself straying to the other side of the fence, fine. And I think we will end up falling into what's natural for us, because I think back to my days as a socialist, is like I said the rhetoric, but a lot of the words still got caught in my throat. I had the vitriol, I had the anger, but it was, like I said, it was forced. I was defending something I knew wasn't right. As I started leaning more towards the right and more towards the other way, everything just felt more natural. It's like I was able to speak more thoroughly, more flow, because I was settling into who I am. And I'm a more fastidious, more conscientious person. All the trait markers that Jordan Peterson talks about for people who lean right, naturally.
Right.
I found that. I'm really glad I was raised in an apolitical household in a very socialist-friendly part of the country, where I was exposed to things that weren't right for me, because then I eventually found my way to things that were right for me. Whereas if I was raised in the middle of Iowa, Republicans all around me, I never would have experience the other side. I wouldn't be able to connect to it, wouldn't be able to understand it, it would be like talking Martian to somebody from New York. I'm grateful for the experiences. I'm grateful for all the pain and heartache, and like I've said so many times, if I had learned about the real value of the free market and about capitalism, about self-determination, about taking personal responsibility instead of pushing it all on somebody else, the 1% or whomever, if I had learned all that stuff sooner, I wouldn't have gone through this journey. I don't want to take the value away from everything I've learned.
Nor should you.
Oh, don't tell me what I should want.
This is where being a part of a tribe, a group, is so great because it's so instructive. Embody that, be in it, be a part of it, but then to zoom out, to view it from a purely objective perspective, and to assess our own feelings, our own place in it, and then to experience all of these different sides of ourselves, or where we gravitate. So a part of you gravitated to the socialist side, you experienced it, then you went right and you experienced it, and we're always finding ourselves gravitating towards some middle.
But this is also why, we're talking about tribes, how they formed in proximity, and how we have ideological tribes we form digitally. And I was talking to a client once. She was a very, very sweet woman. She worked in a school. She was a white woman. She was working with the Hispanic community, very obviously very, very left-leaning, and she was helping people in the Hispanic community find resources, find help, find welfare, find translations, whatever. And I was massaging her at the time. We were having a conversation because I'm a very good massage therapist. I can do both at once. In fact, it helps me work better sometimes. And I said, listen, I lean very far right. And I could feel her whole body lock up under me. I said, listen, you would be surprised how many more allies and friends you would find on the other side of the aisle. And she started to relax. I love America. And I want other people who love America to come here and be American. And you would be surprised how many other people who wear American flag pins and Trump hats really love immigration. I love the idea of immigration, of people going to the tribes that are most like their ethics. The guy who took care of my family's cars for most of my life, he was from Greece. He loved his country, but he couldn't stand his countrymen. He's like, they're lazy, they don't work. He was a very conscientious guy, very hardworking guy, always ran a good shop, always honest. He's one of the best people I've ever known. But he didn't like his tribe. He went to America where everyone just works 20 hours a day. He's like, now I feel at home.
The right has all these other factions within itself. You just pointed out, like, yeah, we're pro-immigration.
A lot of us.
Those who just get bogged down in the fucking dogma, and they want to fight, they want to have an enemy. And, you know, you give them an enemy, they will bite. They will attach to it.
It's an addiction to outrage, I think Glenn Beck calls it.
Oh, we fucking love that rage.
Yeah, don't we?
Whatever we focus on, we amplify.
Yes.
You know?
I hope tonight that Tom and I expose enough about ourselves here where we can show whatever your makeup is, whatever you're inclined for. You're going to have to work with that. You're going to have to push yourself. That's for damn sure. You got to question. You know what? Let's say of everything for stage 1. How would you accept the call to adventure? How would you know it's calling? You got to start with the question. Then the call can be answered.
Start questioning where you are. Start questioning why you're there. Start questioning where you're finding resistance, because sometimes it's right where you're finding that resistance. That's the indication that's where you need to be moving forward, and that's something that you need to start overcoming, and then start questioning why you're resisting.
We don't have to dissect all the possibilities. No. We gave you ours. Like Jordan Peterson says, you know when you're talking to an ideologue, when you don't hear anything come from them that you couldn't learn from Twitter or from Tumblr or from wherever. Jordan Peterson talks about this a lot. Pay attention. Pay attention to yourself. Listen to what you say. Listen to why you say it. Only you could be that honest in the darkness of your room at night when no one else is around and no one else is listening. To draw back to the mind program, another thing it's been doing, as I'll reveal in my next journal, those answers and those questions are a lot clearer for me. You know, your subconscious mind talks in your dreams. I don't feel like I'm sleeping because my dreams are so hard. Even if I don't remember them, I feel like I've just been working all night, because the subconscious is coming to the surface. So I'm feeling myself more, I'm hearing myself more, and I'm being a lot more honest. And I'm saying things to myself where, you know, I feel like I got a little bit of that contact of the divine, because I'm saying things to myself I wouldn't normally say when I ask a question I didn't want the fucking answer to.
What you have an incredible, like, self-awareness, and that's really what we're going to try to really hopefully encourage everyone to do is just become more.
I'm not bragging, but you know, this is just how I've developed, and I'm blessed by the gods that I have this ability to think of the pain I've had to go through to get to the point where I can be this honest. It's like we were talking about last time. It's like the more you get rejected by beautiful women, the easier it is to go approach them. Mm-hmm. It's like the more pain I've gone through asking these disturbing fucking questions about my very existence, eventually it's just like, oh shit, all right, this is gonna hurt, bring it on. And that's what we want to encourage you all to do. I'm still walking and talking and living through it, and you all can too. So let's summarize it as this. Whatever your ordinary world is, whatever it looks like, the only way you are going to get better and have a more meaningful life is if you question the water. What is the substance of the world you're in? Really look around. Look for the code of the matrix. Look for that stuff. And we're talking in abstraction. We're going to get into more detail throughout the series. We're talking in abstraction now because you really just have to ask those questions and wait in the darkness and the silence for the answers you might not want to hear.
When you're laying there at night and it's dark and it's quiet, take a few deep breaths. This is where I get some of my deepest work done.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
That's why people can't sleep at night, because that's when these things come to them. They say, oh, I couldn't sleep till 2 a.m. It's like, well, because you don't do this shit during the day.
Yeah, sometimes you wake up and you have these dreams. Write them down.
Yeah.
Write them down, and then start to research some of these symbols in your dreams.
We're going to have to come back to this when we get to, I'd say, number 4, Supernatural Aid. This is the Hero's Breath podcast wrapping up episode number 2, The Ordinary World. One more time, folks. Get out there, or get in there, and question the water.
Question the water.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.